Jude didn't listen to Frankie and I, and she took Mary Lou and Bryce to the Duncan Farmers Market, and now they've disappeared. Bryce phoned us with some bogus plan to meet us at 8 Maids of Milking at Butchart. I wanted to wring his neck, but you can't do that over the phone. Jude and I had a blazing row in which I basically called her a dangerous dumbass, and she called me a shriveled soul spewing negativity into the universe. I stomped out and slammed the door. Ran into Frankie in the hall. "What's wrong?" she said. Rather than spread the panic, I changed the topic. I said, "You've changed your clothes," I said. She gave me a look and said, "I thought it would be useful." No idea what she was talking about, but just then I saw Clarence drive up to the front entrance with the bus. Boy, was I glad to see him. I asked Frankie to go and tell everyone that it was time to load up and go to Butchart, and I went to settle up with Clarence. I could have kissed him, but I settled for thanking him about 1,000,000 times and signing the visa bill with a flourish. Suck on that, Sam. Besides replacing the windows and tires and checking the lift, Clarence and the guys had gaffer taped all the seats, and they'd even put the Butchart Gardens or bus sign back together and hung it on the side of the bus. I choked up when I saw it, and so did the penny pinchers, and not because they were overcome with the kindness of strangers, but because they were shocked and horrified. I forgot that they hadn't seen the bus since it had been vandalized. Jude stepped in and unruffled their feathers by telling them that the RCMP had determined that the vandalism was done by a group of local youths and they shouldn't worry about anything. I kept my mouth shut. Sometimes the truth is not useful. We took off for Butchart about 3:30. Frankie sat in her seat fingering her beads. Bunny sat next to her. Jude sat in the back talking to Raven like nothing had ever happened. Irene was her usual sphinx-like self. Frida was asleep. Nobody sang. It was still light when we went over the Malahat, so I didn't have to worry about headlights in my eyes as I went around those curves. We got to Butchart Gardens about 4:30 and we're creeping along in the vehicle line to the pay booth when Jude stands up and says, "We should start looking for Mary Lou and Bryce right now because maybe we would see them before we got to 8 Maids of Milking." And I said, "Well, if anybody sees them, tell me before you call out to them." "I don't think that's necessary," said Jude. "Please," said Frankie, "I think it would be best." Well, nobody was going to argue with the sister and the aunt of the people who were missing, so that took care of that. Raven brought me up the reservation confirmation from Frida, and I stuck it out the window at the pay booth and was directed to the bus and van parking lot where all the rows are named after sea creatures. There were a lot of buses and vans. We ended up in the lobster row. Frida told everybody to stay together. Bunny wanted to know, were we going to start at the Partridge in a Pear Tree or were we going to go straight to the 8 Maids of Milking? Frankie and Frida and I looked at each other. I didn't look at Jude, and I don't think they did either. Then Frida said, "Let's go to the 8 Maids of Milking first, and we can do the rest of the show when we're all together again." As we made our way to the walkway from the parking lot, 1,000,000 colored lights came on, and a fully orchestrated version of the 12 Days of Christmas filled the air. As worried as I was still thrilled. I mean, music gets to me in a way that nothing else does. It kind of makes my blood tingle. I stopped to take in all the millions of colored lights in the trees, and then when I looked up at the night sky, I remembered how worried I was. We moved along in a stream of people oohing and awing. Then past the visitor center, the crowd veered off to the left to go to the sunken garden and the first day of Christmas, and Frida led us off to the right because she knew exactly where she was going since she comes every year. She led us right to the field in front of the rose garden, and there were the 8 Maids of Milking, all outlined in clear plastic tubing with little yellow lights about every 4 inches. In the dark, it was magical. "So now what?" said Jude. Well, we all kind of milled around and we looked around, and that's when I realized that Irene was missing. That does it, I said. If she's not back at the bus when we leave, we're going without her. She can jolly well call Sam and have him come and collect her. This was something I thought even Jude and I would agree on. And I turned my attention back to the 8 maids, but the problem was those little lights, they didn't really illuminate anything but the maids, and they actually made the space around them darker, so it was hard to see anything. And then suddenly Frankie trumpets out, "Bryce, this is your great-grandmother. Come out where I can see you." A flashlight snapped on and focused on Frankie's face. "What the hell?" a man's voice said as he stepped from the shadows with one hand gripping Bryce's arm. "How the hell did you get out?" I recognized him immediately as the city slicker from Ladysmith Light Up. "Pete, check the van." Black leather guy stepped into the light from the other side. "I swear to God, Marv, I tied her up." "Go check on Chris," said Marv. "I would appreciate it very much if you would let go of my great-grandson's arm," Frankie said, shooting a look at Bryce, who looked like a deer caught in the headlights. "Just give me the damn music box," Marv said, he of the matching leather coat and gloves. Oh, this is bad, I thought. The music box was still in Frida's bag on the back of her wheelchair, but I didn't want anybody paying attention to Frida because the minute she saw City Slicker, she whipped out her cell phone. And also, Raven had taken off and was following the black leather guy. "We don't have it here," I said before anybody could speak. A weird thing happened. There was a moment of silence where everybody figured out what was going on and agreed to go with it. "It's in the bus," said Jude. "I'll go get it." "Nah," said Marv. "We'll all go." He reached in his pocket, pulled out a knife, flicked the blade open, and held it to Bryce's throat. Bryce froze. His eyes widened in a world of understanding and terror. I froze. Our group understanding was shattered. I was alone, staring at the knife and Bryce, not knowing what to do, or knowing that anything I do might injure Bryce or even end his life. It chilled me to the bone and beyond. I was afraid to look at the others. From the silence around me, I figured they pretty much felt the way I felt. Marv broke the silence. "Where's your bus?" "It's in the bus and van parking lot," Jude replied. "Take me there, sweetheart." Oh, I bet Jude loved that. "And remember, I got the kid and I can cut him bad, so don't try anything funny." "I'm walking with my great-grandson," said Frankie, moving forward and taking Bryce's free arm. City Slicker growled. "Remember what I said, old lady." I don't think he knew what to do with Frankie. Well, that's good, I thought. At least he's hesitating to cut old ladies. Frankie's gutsy move and starting to walk unfroze my mind, which started to work like a hamster on a wheel. I lagged behind to be near Frankie and Bryce in case by some miracle I had an idea of what to do. Frida also slowed down, so she was next to me. Could she suddenly throw her wheelchair in reverse and take out City Slicker? Well, and then what? May and Bunny were quivering like poplars in a high wind. I was afraid they were going to fall over. I was a bit shaky myself. I didn't dare turn around and look at Frankie. City Slicker was right on my tail. There was nobody around us. We could see a few people in the distance, but most of the crowd was making their way to the back of the garden. I figured they were about up to 5 gold rings. No help there. When we reached the entrance to the parking lot, Bryce piped up. "Let the old ladies go, they didn't do anything." "Where's the music box, dumbass?" "Gaga, tell them, please," Bryce pleaded. Dumb kid. Fortunately, City Slicker did not know what Gaga stood for. "It's on the bus," said Frankie. "We'll see it when you get there." I didn't know a pale old lady could go any paler, but she did. She guessed the same as me. These were not the kind of guys who were just going to let us go. The box was our only bargaining chip. Frida lifted her head to say something, but I put my hand on her shoulder and I shook my head ever so slightly. She gazed at me quizzically, but she didn't say anything. While we moved down the row of disability vehicles, I concentrated on trying to figure out where their van was. They did say they had a van, didn't they? In any case, this lot was only for buses and vans, so it was our only hope. Keep moving. City Slicker kicked my heel. When we got to the bus, Jude unlocked the door and crawled in. All of a sudden, we heard the engine turn over. What the fuck, you crazy broad? City Slicker dropped his hold on Bryce and ran for the bus door. Frida backed her wheelchair into him. He fell sideways and dropped the knife. May picked it up, dropped it in her bag, and took off with her poles like a slalom skier at the Olympics. Bunny went with her, and the two of them disappeared behind the buses in the seahorse row. Bryce threw himself on top of City Slicker before he could get to his knees. Jude backed the bus up and sped down the road in the parking lot. Raven stepped into the bus headlights and signaled Jude to follow her. She must know where the van is, I thought. I ran after the bus. Raven led us to a panel van at the end of the crab row. I should have thought of that. These guys would not have had a passenger van. I bet it was the only panel van in the entire lot. Never mind. When we got to the van, we found Mary Lou using her jacket to stop the flow of blood coming from Chris's stomach. What happened? I cried. Oh, said Mary Lou, I'm afraid I played the old lady card and I talked Chris into letting me loose. I was halfway down the parking lot, hiding behind the buses, trying to make my way back to our bus, when a badly dressed and extremely unpleasant man showed up and started yelling at Chris. I was horrified when he took out a knife and stabbed Chris in the stomach. Then he ran off, so I went back to the van to see if I could help Chris. He really needs an ambulance. Do you think Frida could call one? Frida! Oh my God, I forgot totally about Frida and Bryce, and I had run off, leaving them with the other knife-wielding thug. I turned to go back, and I was greeted by a festival of entirely different lights. Red and blue cop car lights were coming from the lobster row. Frida must have gotten through on her cell. There was ambulance lights too. I said, I'll go for the ambulance. Please hurry, Mary Lou said. I was almost cheerful as I started back. Then I suddenly thought, where's the leather guy? I stopped and I looked around, and then I started to creep from bus to van and make my way back. But I needn't have worried. As I came into the light near the ambulance, I saw two cops leading a hand-cuffed black leather guy to the back seat of their cruiser. Apparently, he was easy to spot even though he ran into the crowd, because nobody wears leather to the Butchart Gardens Magic of Christmas either. It was a fashion mistake. Okay, I was giddy with relief. May and Bunny appeared from behind a tour bus and handed the knife to a police officer who looked confused but put it in an evidence bag. As for City Slicker, he needed an ambulance too. Frida didn't think that Bryce could keep him on the ground long enough, so she backed up over his hand, and he screamed in pain and could think of nothing else. Frida said it felt kind of creepy because she could feel his bones crunch, but she didn't know what else to do. Mary Lou joined us after the ambulance took Chris away, and we were all together again, except Irene. Jude went off with an officer to see if they could find her in the crowd, which was now strung out all the way from a partridge in a pear tree to the 12 drummers drumming. I was so glad I didn't have to go. My feet were killing me. I just wanted to sit down. The Butchart people really stepped up. They took us to a private part of the mansion that's not open to the public, and while the police took us one by one into a little room to make our statements, the Butchart people served us tea and hot chocolate. They even opened up the gift store and got a new jacket for Mary Lou. This one had beautiful blue poppies all over it. I wondered if Frankie would buy one to match it. Okay, weird things come into your mind when you're shook. Jude showed up with Irene in tow. They found her in the coffee shop drinking hot chocolate, which she willingly abandoned when she found out that the rest of us were being treated like royalty in the private part of the mansion. I was okay until it was my turn to go in to give my statement. Whoa, I started to shake all over. Even my voice shook. We were so damn lucky. It turned out that Chris and the leather guys worked for some mega crime boss who, besides running B&E gangs, was into drugs and money laundering and gambling. What the hell were those guys doing chasing some poor hapless teenager around Vancouver Island for a music box? Turns out the boss's mother collects music boxes, and this one was exceedingly rare. It was worth, wait for it, $175,000. I had a vision of me and Jude taking it apart with my Swiss Army knife. I said nothing. Bryce was in with the police the longest, which made Frankie and Mary Lou very nervous, but they needn't have worried. It was a changed Bryce who went in to talk to the police. This time, when he said Daddy didn't know what the big deal was, he was lying, but he carried it off. And the thugs weren't talking, so the police let him go with a stern warning. Talk about coals to Newcastle. It must have been nearly 11 when we got back to the bus. A police officer offered to drive us back to the motel, but Jude said she could handle it, and I let her. Frida had phoned ahead to the hotel manager who was waiting for us when we got there. Frida and Raven got the disability suite right next to the office, and the rest of us got 4 rooms right down the row from them, all on the ground floor. Thank you, Cedarwood. As we unloaded our luggage and went into our rooms, I heard Frida say, "Sleep in, ladies. Late brunch tomorrow." I was so tired I didn't care who saw me take off my clothes. I stood in the middle of the room and took off my clothes and put on my PJs. So did Jude. When we were in bed with the covers tucked up to our chin, I just couldn't help myself. I said, "You ran off and left us with a knife-wielding thug." "You followed me," she said. Damn, that was the end of that conversation.